All right, Lucas, we're live. Welcome, man.
Thanks for having me.
So, somehow, 14 months after initial lockdowns, we're still talking about COVID. And I think we agree on a lot. It's a lot of bullshit. But we were just talking about how compliant everybody has been being. And I feel like there's a little bit of waking up to it from like major news media and stuff like that. Like, even Trevor Noah finally I saw was like, all right, the CDC, this is kind of bullshit. Uh, yeah, over a year later, it took that long, but there is progress. What are your thoughts on everything so far? We're recording this May of 2021 for people that are listening, by the way.
It's been a crazy year for everybody. I remember I get these Facebook timeline um, feedback from like a year ago. And I live in Austin, Texas. I'm downtown Austin. And I remember I got one in March where it was Friday night. I was sitting in my apartment alone and like the world was ending, right? And where I sit, I'm right on Lake Austin in the heart of the city, and there's these interesting there's roads that go right into downtown. And I think of these roads as like an artery, like a heart of the city where you can see traffic pumping in and pumping out. And it's kind of like the heart and the pulse of the city of Austin. That's how I look at it. And it was Friday night a year ago, and there was not a it was 9 p.m. and there was not a single car coming in or out of the city. And it was the spookiest feeling. It was like Armageddon. And looking back, it's been a crazy year of like utter panic for society, incredible rule following for certain people, irrational and sometimes rational fear, and watching how different friends of mine, different family members, different associations that I have, how people have decided kind of where they align and how they react. And I think it shows a lot about character. So just this whole year has given me an incredible insight and thought process into like who I hang out with, how I hang out with them. You think about like when shit hits the fan in the world or in your life, how are people going to show up? And I think that this whole COVID experience was a good experiment in a greater theme of understanding how people act.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question.
I mean, has there been, I think we're around the same age. How old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay, I just turned 31. When do you turn 31?
February. I just turned
Oh,
30.
okay. So you're 1991.
Yep.
I'm 1990. Got it. So we're about a year apart. I'm March of 90. So this maybe in our lifetime, I don't know if there's ever been such a dividing political thing as COVID, because like there's the BLM stuff, and like we can probably both agree that we have a lot of area to grow from like a racism standpoint. I don't think, burning shit in the streets and stuff like that is the best way to make progress, and that's more the challenges I have. And then the all the hypocrisies with COVID, when all that stuff was happening, that you couldn't do certain things but you could protest and all that. But I think most people can agree on, like, at the very least, like, hey, like, let's treat everybody fairly, let's grow in these areas. I think most of America's on the same page with that. But the COVID thing, it is like, it's binary. It's like either wear a mask and all about like virtue signaling and I guess protecting people and this mindset.
Incredible virtue signaling.
I've never. This is like, what are your thoughts on people taking pictures on social media with masks? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I, you know, I've gotten into some heated debates on Facebook, which is probably not a great use of my time, but I find it kind of intellectually stimulating, and I kind of charge it to the game of community service as communal awareness, which is maybe how I justify my time spent on there. But basically you've got a certain portion of the population that's decided that if you don't wear a mask, you hate old people and you are completely careless and you're a massive Trumper and you don't care about the health of the average person in America and all this stuff. And it just seems like the biggest hypocrisy that you can just label anyone without knowing anything about their health as, you know, this terrible degenerate of society, and then virtue signal. It just doesn't add up. And it seems like it's actually not caring about people by labeling them in a certain way and then, you know, putting a stigma on them for all of society, in front of their friends, in front of their family. It's irrational and crazy, right? What do you think?
I mean, I personally have just decided, like, I will rarely wear a mask. The only time I really have to wear one is an airplane, and I'm doing everything I can to not have to fly, but I've just decided last week I'm not wearing a mask anymore, like, at all. Not because I don't care about people, but, like, at what point do we, like, a big chunk of the country is vaccinated. The vulnerable people or people that wanted to be vaccinated could be vaccinated. Like, what are we even, like, what is the conversation even still going on this point? Like, why are masks even, and I still a ton of people wear them, and especially outside. Like, it's beyond science. It's about, like, culture at this point. And that's where it's become, and whoever led the charge here, the CDC / the news media / you know, people on social media, it has become like a way to fit in, right? To wear a mask. I think that's more of what it is than actual science, because there's so many things, including little kids wearing them and shutting down schools and all these things, that have no scientific evidence, but they do them. People wearing them outside, no scientific evidence, but people do it. And it's just like about culture. And that's the scary thing, is it's just millions and millions of Americans that aren't following data, that aren't doing their own research, that are doing it to just fit in and not get shamed. Is that where we've become?
You know, the thing that kind of irks me, there's a couple of things that really irk me about this problem. One is the complete lack of personal accountability. You know, it is your health, it is your body. And how you treat your body and how you treat your health is going to be indicative of your longevity. So when you're looking at some of those Fauci updates and those media stunts that happened, you know, the number one comorbidity of COVID is obesity. And yet he's telling the government was telling everybody, you know, not to exercise outside. And I'm like, wait a second. So people are dying because they've got pre-existing conditions and they're overweight and they've got a caloric density index that's insane, and they're eating way more calories than what they're burning. And we're not giving people accurate information on, like, what is the root cause of the comorbidities. And that is that if you're not treating your body well, if you're not having compassion for yourself through your diet and through your exercise and through your daily life choices, that is your decision. And people need to be better educated on, you know, how about you don't eat a cheeseburger all the time? How about you drop your meat consumption? How about you exercise more? You know, how about you look at the label of what you're eating and look at, you know, how much fiber is in what you're consuming versus pure calories. And if people don't take responsibility for their own health and their own life and their own outcomes, then you're going to have just massive social signaling and shaming going on that is counterproductive to a capitalist society, that needs people to take their own initiative and create value in the world.
Hmm. Do you think there's a correlation? I feel like I maybe am connecting something for the first time, kind of. A correlation between the people that shame others and those people not having like self-love and like self-empathy like for themselves. Like do you think there's a correlation where it's like, hey, and that's common in a lot of areas, right? Most of the times people shitting on other people and talking shit about have like the, you know, worst self-talk for themselves, right? But do you think there's a correlation there? It's just that
Absolutely.
the people loudest about shaming other people have the least amount of self-love and empathy.
Yeah, I mean, how you treat others is a reflection of how you treat yourself. The way you speak to others is a reflection of your own self-talk, and it's 100% correlated. So there you go. Treat people with respect. The United States. This is kind of like something that just drives. That's a hot topic for me, which is a reliance on government and low accountability for yourself. And that's kind of the opposite of what America was founded on. And that's kind of the opposite of what has created progress in society, which I think a lot of progress in society is based on capitalism and is based off of individual freedoms and individual rights and the society as a whole. Like capitalism is the greatest democratization effect that has ever happened in the world, because it allows every single person in the world, or every single person in the United States, to vote every single time they consume something. It's the definition of democratization. If you don't like a company, if you don't like what they believe in, if you don't like how they treat women, if you don't like their environmental procedures, if you don't like how they treat animals, you have the right to vote with your dollars against them and for something else. And that is the coolest part of personal liberty and how it correlates to capitalism. And what I see is a shift towards kind of anti-capitalist momentum going on within our society, which is really like anti-freedom and anti-liberty and anti-self-actualization. And I'm bringing this up because I think it relates to COVID also, when it comes to civil liberties and choosing to take accountability for your own results in life.
No, I agree completely. And capitalism, if there ever was a time for it to even be more effective than it has been the last couple hundred years since, really the inception of the U.S., is now with social media apps. Because, in the 1800s, you and me could start a business, scam people in Orlando, and then take our carriage up to, another city and just keep running the same. Like, you can't do that in modern time. Like, if you treat a bunch of people, you legitimately start scamming people. I mean, it's very, very difficult for you to operate. If you treat employees bad, there's social media, there's ways of communication, like on a grand, like worldwide scale. So, like, if there's ever a time where capitalism can actually be most effective, it's with we're with modern technology, with review apps and people sharing bad experiences. And so I think that I agree completely. I'm very pro capitalism. It's really strange how I feel like the Democratic Party, it's like, I get the feeling as an entrepreneur, like I lean Democrat on a lot of major things, but I feel like they're like anti-entrepreneur, anti-capitalist. That's the vibe I've got from most, and that's kind of repulsive to me because I've dedicated my whole life to building business and hiring people and trying to offer services to the marketplace, and that's something I'm very passionate about, and that's the great equalizer for people that are low income or for people of color or whatever it is. If you offer a good product or service to society, nobody cares what you look like, how many years you spent in jail, who you're having sex with, what body parts you have. Truly, like, you know what I mean? Like, if there was a product or service that made people's lives better, like, do we care about any of that?
No, because you're creating value.
Yeah.
And capitalism rewards people that create value, period. And it's like the great equalizer where anyone can, and I see like a lot of, I'm very socially liberal. I don't really care what drugs you do. I don't really care who you sleep with. I don't care who you marry. None of my business. I'm a libertarian, so it's like just get out of my way.
So am I. Most of Americans, I think, are leaning that way, especially our generation and younger. It's not even for or against. It's just like, I don't care what you do.
Yeah, just
do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's liberties, then who cares? It's none of your business. But we've got. I agree with you that like a lot of people I think are libertarian, but they don't know about libertarians because we have this crazy corrupt two-party system. But I see a certain part of our population going very libertarian, which is awesome, which is very exciting. But then I see another part, which I would say is very Democrat leaning, that is essentially buying votes. And I consider it modern day economic slavery, where you've got one party promising all these things. I'll eliminate your debt. I will give you unlimited health care. You should be able to not work and still get paid. It's literally enslaving a population into handouts, but doing it on their dollar, but pretending like you're not. So a lot of people are like, well, yeah, this stimulus check is amazing. I'm like, well, it should be amazing because you paid for it. A lot of people don't realize that. They're like, oh, I got a free check from the government. Like, there's nothing free about your check from the government. I see a lot of crypto guys that are like, well, the US dollar isn't backed by anything, which is wrong. The US dollar is backed by the American public's ability to pay taxes. The US government can increase taxes as much as they want to pay back the debt. So when we start racking up, we're at almost $30 trillion of debt right now in the United States. That's like $270,000 per taxpayer in the United States. So, but people don't realize that, the government giving us stuff is really you taking debt out on yourself and then them not telling you. You follow me?
Totally.
It's ridiculous. Like, these people are cheersing in the streets about a stimulus check that they don't realize that they're on the hook for. It's brutal. And so when you have, this has been a fundamental question in my head, and I don't have the answer to it, but it's illegal to buy votes. But what is our definition of buying votes? Because if a politician is promising a lot of things and then using the federal government's ability to take out debt to do those things, where is the line between that and buying votes? I don't know.
Yeah. And to be fair, I will say, the Republican Party hasn't been, again, I'm very libertarian. We probably align on almost, most things. Republican Party spent a lot of money too. So it's not,
Totally.
Yeah, it's not just the Democratic Party. If anything, if it's like, hey, do you want to spend money on military or it's people? I probably do side, like, let's probably spend on the people if it's one or the other. Not say I'm very pro-military, but I think we spend too much on military.
Oh, it's insane.
But
Our military spending is absolutely insane.
do you know
Yeah.
what the single biggest thing I think would change politics like dramatically in this country? And it's, I can't remember. I looked this up like few months ago because I was curious. It wasn't until like the 1930s or 40s somebody came up with the idea like, let's start taking taxes out of people's paychecks. So most American workers don't even really realize the impact of like taxation, which is genius from a government and control standpoint, right? Because if you don't, of course, it's like, yeah, tax the wealthy more. In theory, that sounds great. Like tax, just raise taxes. But when you're not even at 100 grand or 75 grand household income, if both the husband and wife or whatever, if they're just both W2 employees making 40-50 grand a year, they're paying, depending on deductions, they have 10 or 15 grand or whatever a year in taxes, but they don't even realize that they are paying that taxes. So I feel like there's a lot less emotional attachment to how the government spends the money. And I think that's the big issue, is if people realized like that's how like, if you just look from a control standpoint, there are so many humans that in America are excited about tax returns, and they get, that's like a celebration every year. And it's like, it's because you overpaid. You have been paying this whole time. And like, people don't really like, what could you have done if you just held that money the whole time? And then like, maybe got really creative and aggressive on deductions. And like, the average American worker doesn't think like that. It's just like, cool, I paid all this money in 2020. So, February of 2021, I'm getting this check. And there again, I just, if people started writing a check at the end of the year, which is probably what you do, I literally am completed my taxes today, and I don't get really excited about that. I mean, think about how the dynamic would shift in this country if people had to write a check at the end of the year.
Totally. It's one of those things where, like, I think about the United States as a business. And this is how I think about my immigration policy thoughts. This is how I think about taxation. This is how I think about debt. The United States is a company. And our Federal Reserve, all of it is a business. And our federal government takes in revenue from taxes. And then our federal government spends money. And right now, like, if you were a venture capitalist, or if you were a private equity firm, and you saw a company that was losing money as net operating income year after year after year with a widening loss, and then taking out tons of debt to cover it, you'd probably be like, I'm not going to invest in this company. But the only way that incremental debt really makes sense is if that company said, I'm going to take out debt to buy a new company that has a bunch of net operating income, or I'm going to take out debt to launch this new division, and this is our business plan for this new division that's going to be profitable, that's going to add revenue. That would make sense, right? And infrastructure plans, like, history has shown that when we take out debt for specific ROI positive infrastructure plans, then it's an ROI positive debt. But right now we're spending money on things that are absolutely not ROI positive, while the government is not taking in enough revenue to cover operating costs. And it's a disaster.
Yeah. No, I agree. And what are your thoughts on, so some like older people I talk to, I feel like there's like two definitions of libertarian. I feel like the more younger libertarian is like, I'm not, some like older guys I talk to, so you're like anti-taxation. I'm like, I'm not anti-taxation. I think some taxes is fine. I think the issue we have is just so low confidence that the government is going to spend it even remotely close to wisely. Like, because it's like, if you look at some some countries that tax higher, like, and again, part of the issue is we're just a large country, right? I think it's, if you're Sweden and you're a fraction of the size and you're, very similar cultures and backgrounds, and I think it's a lot different and simpler than what we have. But are you of like the libertarian where it's just like little to no taxes? Or are you like, I obviously don't want high taxes, but something reasonable with some government like spending on certain things? Like, I'm not against taxation. It's just I feel like I have such low confidence in government decision making on spending. And that's where I'm more anti-taxing. Because if it was like clear, it's like, hey, the road, like, your roads are going to be beautiful, your airports are going to be beautiful, everyone is going to have, some sort of top tier healthcare, like even, trade schools are covered, and we're like, if it was just like clear and it's just like, all right, that's maybe on the progressive side, but at least it's like clearly laid out and it's like you can agree or disagree, but there's going to be actual benefit from it. But that's not even the issue. Like in California, you pay a, top tax rate of 50+%, and like we don't even have a national health care. Like that's the crazy thing. It's like you're paying like Sweden rates without the Sweden benefits, right? Like,
I'm conflicted on this. I'm generally with your position. Like we need if we're going to have a federal government, which I think we should have a federal government, we need to, as a society, kind of do a cost-benefit analysis on what that federal government should be responsible for. And then the big question is, if they're responsible for it, how can we use free market capitalism to drive efficiency? Should they just be a project manager on private sector bids? Or should they be actually orchestrating the development of projects? And to me, it's pretty clear. Government is terrible at spending money efficiently. And a lot of the reason is because they don't have to. They're not held to any real standards, and they'll just keep taking out debt. Bill Clinton did a great job of balancing the budget and dropping the debt. Since then, it's been a freaking nightmare. So I think we should have some baseline level of taxation, but if the government is going to do something like an airport, I don't think it should be clear cut, like this is government, this is the government's role and the government's going to operate the airport, or this is private sector and private sector is going to privately fund the whole thing and run the airport. I think we should have companies bidding out how much it's going to cost to build the airport, improvements, an ROI analysis of how much additional revenue they can bring into that community for having that airport there, and then have private sector run it and operate it, and only use the government to collect tax revenue
and fund
the smallest amount humanly possible, and to bid out the system in some sort of auction. We should have people like Ray Dalio running federal spending.
So I agree with that a lot. The downside of that is kind of what's happened to the U.S. prison system, which is a great example of what you're talking about, is actually what happens. But then, unfortunately, there's a lot of incentivization for prisoners to stay in longer, harsher sentences for drug laws, which we both probably believe are fucking stupid. But like, so I think, from an efficiency standpoint, there's benefits there, but then there's lobbying from the prison systems that fund both parties, right? Which is why both parties haven't really made many moves in certain areas. But that's the downside, is then there's the lobbying. So like what would
should prison be, if the government's main role is to provide safety and to provide infrastructure for our judicial system, should the prison system even be privatized? Because that seems more like a safety thing than anything else, right?
Yeah, but That's a good point. I mean, prison. So what we will agree, if there government involvement in healthcare, whatever the long term solution there, you have to have some segment of a private sector because that's what is innovative. I will agree with you. Prison systems maybe don't need to be as innovative, right? Like you're not necessarily looking to promote innovation as much as just keeping certain people out of society or some security, domestic security and stuff like that. So I don't disagree. But yes, whatever government gets involved in, some sort of hybrid where government is writing the checks, doing their due diligence, getting the some sort of combination of the best price and best deliverables, and having the private sector deliver the services, handle the
Almost,
maintenance, stuff like that.
almost like a venture capital fund,
Yeah.
where if they're making strategic investments, they shop out who they think the winner is going to be, why they think it is, what they think the ROI is going to be, how many of them are going to fail, how many of them are going to succeed, and what's the overall ROI on the portfolio.
Yeah.
But when you have politicians buying votes, and when you have politicians bought by private sector players through lobbying, that's a bad thing. Like, why? I saw a great meme that came out right after Joe Biden announced that he's going to increase the wealth tax. And of course, he didn't touch the inheritance part because a lot of his funders would have a problem with that. I think that we should sextuple the taxes on any politician that has made $100,000 a year for his entire career, but somehow has $30 million in the bank.
I agree.
How did you do that?
And that should be more of a mainstream discussion, and it's not. I agree on both sides. I know Paul Ryan was like a great example. Came in like no money, still a relatively young guy. Now he's massive net worth. It wasn't from his government salary.
Yeah.
Both sides. I definitely think there has to be something in place. I don't know what can be done, but other than maybe higher taxation. Yeah, if you take this government role, you get in this super high tax rate, like for anything over your government salary.
Yep, I think so. And I think that the federal government, as long as we're in this big of a deficit, and they're spending like there should be, just like in my companies, like if one department is super overspending and not producing results, they shouldn't get bonuses, and their pays should be evaluated quarterly because they're not providing an ROI to the organization. Same thing should be with government. So,
well, the thing is with government, and I've shit on government employees for a long time, and I'm not saying like I know some, not that they're not good people, but the type of person that a government job would attract is they're obviously getting into something for security, right? They're not innovators in most cases because they would work in the private sector. They're not, like, sometimes I would even argue that they there's nonprofit opportunities that can make more of an impact. So it's like, what's the incentivization really to work for the government in most cases, especially at a lower level? It's job security and a benefit and pension plan. And those type of workers get weeded out in the private sector.
I think what NASA seems to be doing seems pretty smart, which is kind of this theory we've been talking about with private versus public, with choosing kind of private sector winners and funding them. Like, you look at SpaceX and the costs that are just plummeting for space travel because of reusable rockets that now NASA's leveraging and paying SpaceX to do. Like, that seems like a good model to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. So this is a nice segue because I I want to talk about your view on conscious capitalism and what that is to you. But what have you been up to business wise? So you're completely. We met in the e-commerce and internet marketing world. Are you completely out of the e-com space now?
Yeah, I've had a crazy year of change. So I started my supplement company, Alternascript. We had a brain supplement called Optimind. Started it in college. Grew it. We're in 4,500 CVS stores. All over the internet. There's a documentary called Take Your Pills on Netflix that we were in. Sold it last year. And I started another company about 3.5 years ago. So I used to work at a hedge fund. I started working at a hedge fund when I was 15 as an intern. It was like me and a bunch of Harvard cross-country kids figuring out non-correlated assets to buy. And we found this idea called life settlements. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't believe so.
So most people don't realize this, but 85% of life insurance policies lapse and surrender. So 85% of the time, families never get paid on their life insurance. And you look at the mortgage crisis in 2009, there's like a 4.9% foreclosure rate and the world was ending. We're talking about an 85% foreclosure rate on life insurance. And people don't realize this, but life insurance as of a 1911 Supreme Court ruling is private property. So you can sell it. So if you're 80 years old and you've got $1 million life insurance policy, you might be able to sell it to a hedge fund for $500,000. And then they pay the premiums, the cost for the rest of your life. And when you die, they get the $1 million. So, and it's only at about a 2% market penetration rate. Now, insurance companies hate this because, there's a reason why insurance companies have the highest, tallest skyscrapers in the biggest cities in America. It's because they make a shitload of money. And they do this because 85% of people that get life insurance, they never have to pay. So they don't want people to know.
Explain that, the 85%, so I'm assuming, is this mostly term or even on whole they don't have to pay? How does
term, universal, whole, all of it.
So how are they just not paying on like a whole policy, for example?
So whole is much more rare. We only have a few buyers that operate on whole.
Okay.
The vast majority is universal life and term and convertible term. So let's say we call it the ugly X. So like if you look at a simulation in the United States, when you hit 45, your income gradually starts to drop. And as you get older, your medical expenses go up and up and up every year. When you hit about 75, we call it the ugly X because your annualized medical expenses typically rise above your annualized income. And that's a problem. That's a liquidity problem, right? And so at that point, insurance companies generally jack up your insurance costs because they know that you can't pay for it. So what most people do is they stop paying for it. They just, they'll call their insurance company and they're like, I can't afford these premiums anymore. And the insurance company says, you know what? Don't worry about it. We've got your back. You don't have to pay the premiums anymore. You can just surrender the policy. What they don't tell them is that there's a secondary market where they could sell their life insurance and get liquidity out of it. So what I built, and this is what I'm doing full time, is we built kind of like an eBay. If eBay, Zillow, and the New York Stock Exchange had a fucked up child, it would be our platform, where we've got some of the largest hedge funds in the world and family offices and private equity funds and banks. We've got like the Berkshire Hathaways of the world that buy these life insurance policies as an investment. And so we built a blind bidding auction where you can list a life insurance policy and all these hedge funds all over the world bid up the price so that the family gets the most amount of money humanly possible. And so we're now running auctions every single day. We had 15 policies end yesterday. And it's really cool because it gives, it's expected that there's $130 billion that's lapsing every single year that could have been bought by a hedge fund, but people don't know that they can sell it.
And I'm assuming it's just they keep it, but is there any law that, like, does the insurance company at that point just, like, it's just cash they keep that they don't, if as long as it's not claimed, or like what laws are in place? I imagine there has to be something super basic to protect these end users, or is there not?
No, I mean, if you stop paying your mortgage, bank forecloses on your house.
Yeah, got it. Okay, I see.
Same thing. But the difference is that if you couldn't afford your mortgage, a rational person would figure out what their house is worth and try and resell it and then buy a smaller house.
Yeah.
But people don't know that they can sell their life insurance and do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic business model. How are you generating sellers right now for life policies?
Yeah, so we spent over $1 million on TV last year. So we've got call centers across the United States, and then we've got our main call center in Austin, Texas. So we're spending money on TV, we're doing SEO, we're doing Google AdWords, and then which worked really well with my direct-to-consumer background from supplements, strangely enough. But the CAC, the customer acquisition cost on these policies, it's kind of a needle in a haystack. Like, you get so many policies and just a certain percentage of them actually work. So what we've moved more towards, which has kind of been 100% of my brain, is B2B, which you're an expert at B2B because your whole business is B2B. You have to be an expert at B2B and B2C.
Well, we've been really transitioning. We've been building more of our own brands. We don't do as much client work. It's been a while, but I mean, we run, On It, obviously.
Yeah.
So we run a lot of traffic for them, and there's just like a few legacy kind of good clients and partnerships we have. But yeah, we're really getting out of the direct client work side of things. But that's what I was actually going to ask, is like, are you partnering with like financial advisors and accountants and stuff like that to refer you these opportunities?
Yeah. So that's been basically 100% of my brain, is building out our B2B model. And we're building a blue books for life settlements. So traditionally, to figure out what your life insurance policy is worth can take like 4 months, because you got to get your medical record, you got to get their medical records, you got to get an actuarial analysis on their life expectancy, you got to get information on their insurance premiums, all of it. So we're building a tool. We've got a great data scientist out of Duke, and we're working with a PhD mathematician that specializes on insurance. We're building a tool where financial advisors, RIAs, insurance agents, and consumers in 20 minutes can fill out a form that estimates their life expectancy, estimates their premiums. We're analyzing over $15 billion worth of insurance policies to build a policy premium prediction algorithm. And within 15 minutes, we'll be able to tell you what your life insurance policy is worth. And so right now we've transitioned from a lot of direct-to-consumer stuff to building out sales teams and what we call pods that target specific types of markets, like elder law attorneys, estate planners, life insurance agencies, broker-dealers, and all these different categories. So it's been really cool, really a lot of learning on how to build B2B teams. And what we've found is, I was looking at like what types of companies have had the fastest growth and the best from a B2B perspective, and the highest multiples on sales. And a lot of them are SaaS companies and tech companies. And so they've built, SaaS companies and tech companies really have because they're going up against Oracle, they're going up against IBM, they're going up against these freaking behemoths, and it's a David versus Goliath kind of story. And so they've had to build a really scientific, incredible process for prospecting B2B.
Yeah.
And they have this architecture and infrastructure on how they've done it that's super smart. And so I've just been, consuming as much information as I can and reading about how these tech companies are doing it and then applying it to our other business. And it's smart because it's a lot like a sales funnel. But instead of, like targeted Facebook ads to drip them into a funnel to drive awareness, they've got SDRs, sales development reps that do, 10 touch points. They've got lead research teams that hand off the leads to the SDR teams that do cold call, email, LinkedIn touch. They call double tap, which is, you call once. If they don't pick up, you call back again within 40 seconds. So it feels like it's an urgent call from the same number. Sets up a meeting, has a quick script, sets up a meeting, gives it to an account executive who's like a closer. And then that account executive passes it on to a relationship manager that then takes it from a signed contract to first use and guides the usage process. And then all that funnels through to a relationship manager. And it's freaking smart. And there's all these incredible dashboards where you can look at just like if you were doing a lookalike audience on Facebook, you'd want to look at, maybe you're looking at CPC, probably not. You're probably looking at CPA and LTV, right? Same thing can go for B2B, where, if your SDRs have, like we're using HubSpot right now for our SDR team, each lead can get a score on a 1 to 10, 10 being totally terrible lead, 5 being an okay lead, 7 or 6 being a okay, you called someone at a company and they're like, look, this is the right company, but I'm the wrong person in the company. And then if they say, but you should call this person, the initial person gets dropped to a 10, and then the new person they suggest gets put in as a 3. And so you can do this kind of programmatic scoring of your leads, and then it drops down to your account execs, and then once they're taking meetings, you create a new dashboard that shows like how high quality are the leads that this funnel of SDRs are bringing in, what's their close rate, and then when it goes to a relationship manager, you look at LTV that the account executive brought to that relationship manager. And so you can build these really beautiful custom dashboards that can really show where things are dropping in the funnel, where they need to be corrected, and where you should focus all your B2B budget to amplify that model.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a great model. Do you would an introduction? A buddy of mine has a pretty large financial advisor firm. I think he has 100 advisors that work at his firm. Would a strategic intro like that be?
That would be amazing.
Yeah, happy to help set that up. I mean, it sounds like it could be because he actually gives me a hard time. I bought a whole life policy 4 years ago, and he's like, "Why the fuck did you do that?" So I feel like he would gladly an intro like this, because he's like, yeah, some people it's great to have insurance. He's like, you're not one of them. I don't know why you did this. He's like, obviously, you were just you were a casualty of someone looking to earn a commission. But anywho,
Life has great commissions for agents.
Yeah, he's like, you realize how much money he probably made off this? And he told me. I was like, okay, I can see why he wants me to get that. But yeah, I'm happy to make that intro. I think that could be a really, really strong strategic intro for you.
That would be awesome. The other thing we're doing is I'm working with a big SEC legal team, and something in the broker dealer world passed called Reg BI, Regulation Best Interest, which says that if you're a financial advisor, you have to always be thinking about what's in the best interest of clients. So I'm trying to get a professional opinion letter from an SEC attorney that says like, 85% of policies are lapsing. If you have a client, and life insurance is like family's second or third biggest asset. So if you have a client that can't pay its life insurance and you're not telling them that there's a liquidity option, you're actually breaking Reg BI. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's this is kind of, I know a little bit about it because I have some financial advisor friends and I've been sold a life policy, but yeah, not I don't. But yeah, it makes sense. Like there's like some in that industry, as far as I understand. I was an intern when I was 20 and 21 at a financial advisory firm called Waddell and Reed. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but
No.
yeah, I used to want to be like a stockbroker or like a financial advisor when I was young, and then after that, I was like, yeah, not for me. No,
It's sexy. It's sexy in the Wolf of Wall Street movies, but it's really not that sexy when you get into it.
it's really just relationship building and sales. The one big positive I will say though from this type of business is like there's a lot of people getting into real estate and things, and if I was gonna go into like a financial advisor or real estate, it would definitely be a financial advisor because you can earn the percentage of assets under management for the lifetime of the client. Like the thing, which if you're doing, you have good relationships. It's all a relationship business. If you're earning 1% and you have $1 million under management, as long as those people don't bounce, you're making $1 million a year for not doing anything. And so there is benefits like that. And I've thought in the back of my mind, like maybe one day that's something I, do boutique high end for, because I've been doing a really good job of just building relationships. So I think from that side of it, it's cool, but it's just like anything. It's relationships and who you know. And ultimately, what those guys offer are offered by, it's kind of a commodity. I mean,
Totally.
unless you're like the ultra, like deal with like ultra wealthy, and there's just like these, legitimate, rare investment opportunities. But I feel for 99% of America, it's commodity based, and it's really just about the relationships.
Well, and a lot of them work off of this is kind of an interesting thing that has happened in the investment space is that, let's say you get your Series 65 and your Series 7 and, you've got an RIA or whatever. Telling a family what they should and shouldn't invest in and balancing portfolios is really not something a human brain should totally be doing because you're not able to capture all the variables and all the opportunities within it. And so there's been all these softwares that have come out that are basically like pumping out recommendations for RIAs that they then tell you and look really smart, which is brilliant because the software is going to be able to run models and calculations and scrape the internet and scrape their databases for things that you wouldn't think of, and you can simulate certain load variables based off of risk that a client is and is not willing to take, and just pump out a kind of templated, this is what you should invest in.
Are you familiar with the software? I'm assuming you are. It's called like eMoney.
No.
It's like a lot of financial advisors and insurance professionals use this software. It's like white labeled and it'll have like their brand. So like if you're a small financial advisory firm, obviously you're not going to invest in like your own custom proprietary software, but it looks professional if you have your own client login and dash and stuff like that. So this company eMoney, a lot of advisors I know work with them, and like some strategic partnership with them as well, because the eMoney, like it tracks all of your investments. So like that company, like because I have an eMoney dash and I'll have like all my different investment accounts, my bank accounts, and it has my life policy linked in there as well. So eMoney knows like
Oh,
out of hundreds, probably millions of clients who has a life policy. They know how long the life policy has been active. Obviously, they know all the other investor details, how old they are, and stuff like that. Like some partnership with them, I don't know, like how that would work. Like I just feel like
that's a
leveraging
great.
all their data. Yeah, and
Yeah, you
the
can
guy I
do
want
a
to connect you with is, I think, a pretty big client of theirs. So I feel like he could maybe help with that too.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff can be triggered. Like, if someone has a life insurance policy and they hit a certain age, do you want a free valuation if you're tired of paying for this life insurance policy? Do you want to see what it's worth? Boom. API into it.
No, I think that's great. I'm excited to make that connection for you. I think it's pretty strong. So I want to transition to something that you put that you wanted to talk about, which I'm actually really interested in, because I think this is how we align too, and I think this is where there's a big opportunity for growth, and that's conscious capitalism. It's like using the power of the free market to actually get things done in the world, which it's a lot easier when you're adding value to society instead of just asking people for donations, right? Or hoping the government will come through. So what is conscious capitalism to you, and why is that important to you?
So one of my mentors and one of my best friends is the founder of Whole Foods, John Mackey. I'm actually hiking with him next week for 5 days in the Appalachian Mountains. It's going to be wild.
Wow.
And he has built massive businesses off of the concept of create businesses that add value to society, that their number one thing is solving problems and making people's lives better. And conscious capitalism is about building businesses that matter, building businesses that help people, and making sure that stakeholder value is there so that your customers love you, your tribe loves you, and your business, allowing private sector free market capitalism to solve the world's biggest problems, and allowing people to vote with their dollars on what they think is important to them. So conscious capitalism to me is about building sustainable companies. It's not about not having profit. If you don't have profit, then you don't have the ability to continue helping people. Conscious capitalism is about creating self-sustaining loops of value creation in society by solving real-world problems and helping people every day. And I think that is the future of business in America and business around the world, because people are demanding that they like the companies that they do business with. And people are now starting to realize that every dollar they spend is a vote in what they want to see happen in the world. And so when you invoke conscious capitalism, when you stand behind something, when your company is not just there to, arbitrage clicks or add incremental value, it's about waking up in the morning and saying, is how I'm spending my life, is how I'm spending my professional career making society better, and how much better? And the difference, my dad used to tell me growing up, my dad's a serial entrepreneur, a really talented guy. And he used to say, Luke, if you want to make money, solve a problem. If you want to make a lot of money, solve a really big problem. And so when we start looking at entrepreneurship and capitalism and how we spend our work lives from the perspective of not just EBITDA, but value that you create to the people that buy your products, your businesses are going to boom. And so that's what conscious capitalism means to me. It's about building things that matter to help people at scale. And your EBITDA, I believe, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, companies' EBITDA and valuations will be proportional to the impact that they make on society, both positive and negative. Yeah. And there's a huge stigma. We've got a certain percentage of the population that's kind of like a victim take government money segment that's blaming capitalism for all these problems in society, when capitalism has been the greatest driving force to increasing quality of life in the world thus far. Socialism, pure socialism, has failed every single place that it has been tried. I think it's John told me I think it's been tried. It's tried and failed like 56 times in human history. And the reason is because it doesn't incentivize people.
We're learning that firsthand. I mean, if there was ever an argument for universal basic income, which I think I'm not going to speak for you, but somebody told me a long time ago, and it stuck with me, whether you're for it or against it, we may not have a choice at some point in society to have some sort of universal basic income. And I was like, that's an interesting point. Depending on where, even though that was a theory 100 years ago, right? And it's still like there's constant new jobs and sectors being created all the time. But so many businesses are like having such a hard time hiring people right now. And the argument from people for some sort of the government assistance, oftentimes you hear this argument all the time. People ultimately want to work, right? Like how many times have you heard about like they want to have purpose, they want to have, and that's a good argument in theory, right? Okay, I agree. I think a lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. And the data is showing us that right now. People would, if they're making around the same or even a little bit less, and you don't have to leave your house, or you can leave your house and just do some stuff on the side and maybe earn some more money, non-taxable income, side jobs or whatever. Like, why the fuck is anybody going to have a full-time job? You know what I mean? Like, and we're talking about the blue-collar labor worker, like the higher-end income earners that their lifestyle can't be supported off of unemployment wages. Though it's not the issue in hiring those people right now. It's the lower income wage earner. And yeah, I mean, anywho, not to go on a rant there, but yes, I agree. And we're seeing firsthand whether you've been for it or against it. And I'm not going to deny that unemployment benefits and things like that, I think they serve a purpose. If it's 6 months of you trying to get back on your feet, get another job but we're seeing, and the data is showing, that you pay people not to work, they don't give a shit about getting a job. A lot of people.
It's basic incentivization alignment. Like in your business, you're not going to pay a sales guy commissions on sales he doesn't make. The reason why like so many commission-based people work is because they're aligned. It's about alignment. And when you're paying people not to work, they're not going to work.
The biggest incentivization at a core level, depending on what your, religious beliefs are, I'm very like agnostic, spiritual, atheist, some custom version that I've, we're still working on. But I believe humans are here we have two purposes in life as a living being. We're just a much smarter living being than a lot of other ones, but we're a living being. We're here to be safe and reproduce. And if those two needs are met, like a lot of people aren't going to exert extra energy. It's not in our like DNA to do that. So like a stronger word than incentivization is like survival. Like if we need to do things to put food on the table for ourselves, pay our bill, like people are going to do it because they have to do it. But if those basic survival needs are met, like why would we expect people to go beyond that? Like not, you know what I mean? Like at the basic survival level, we're here to reproduce and stay alive. If you're... Anyway, go ahead.
I've got a theory that's going to piggyback on yours, and it's controversial, and some people think I'm an asshole for saying it, but I'll say it anyways. I think that there's a difference between humans and human beings, and I think it's a choice. And I think that humans biologically are here to eat, sleep, reproduce, and die. And a continuation of human beings' existence biologically, and raising families and all that, which is unbelievable and completely necessary. But that is like a baseline human, which is not necessarily lower or higher or whatever. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like biologically, if you look at them from 1,000-year perspective, their continuation of our race of human beings is what's going to be the great contribution to them if you look at them 5,000 years later. And then there's human beings, which take the position of not just biological improvement and reproduction, but societal evolution, whether it's creating a company that introduces natural organic eating, whether it's putting rocket ships into space, whether in the proliferation of multiplanetary species, have a mission that's outside of the pure biological growth, and that is the subcategory of human being. So I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I just don't know, like, is it learned? Are you born with the difference? Because I think at the core, we're all just looking for those basic survival things. But it's just like how what is like the evolved, like, as I get in arguments with some friends about this and conversations, and I guess not arguments, more like debates, but I think that so many of our decisions, our fears, our bad habits are because of like our core human, like, biological needs. It's like our brain wants to be in a monogamous relationship because we're like, I like the idea of, loving someone and having someone for the rest of my life. And, that sounds really nice, and having that person support me. And then our bodies, you see like a beautiful woman, you're like, okay, well, like our brains and our bodies like aren't completely aligned, right? No matter how advanced we pretend we are, we're not. So it's a complex thing, because I think humans are like, are we at the point now, like, because our brains do evolve very fast, and I don't know if have you read *Sapiens*?
No, it's
Great,
on my list.
highly recommend it. I've read it twice. It's very long though, so there's parts of it that I feel, I'll be honest, like I've zoned out and stuff, but there's a lot of it I have retained. And the reason why fire was the biggest thing that caused humans to develop at the pay, probably second is capitalism, but fire was the first one, because rather than hunting and gathering and stuff for 30-40 hours a week, which was the estimated, which is why our bodies now kind of are used to doing some job or task for 30-40 hours a week. Beyond that, no matter who you are, you're just like not productive. Like, there's tons of studies that support that. But once fire came out, once we discovered it, and how to use it to cook food, and we had all this free time and we went from, maybe 8 hours a day of hunting and gathering and processing our food, and to, you could just get a bunch of stuff. You could have meat that's kind of old. In the past, you couldn't eat it. Now you could throw it on the fire, cook it well done, and there's nutrition value, So fire brought us the ability to sit around, and that's what basically, like, why our brains are so big, and why like language and monogamy and like all these things developed post fire. So like the point I guess I'm making is like, that hasn't been like humans develop so fast, and are mentally, physically, I don't know how fast we're evolving, but mentally we are. Is there like different strains of humans from ancestors that like are like, some are more evolved than others, just based off of like, as simple as like their parents' generation or their grandparents' generation, like, are we at a point in our species where certain like humans are just more evolved? Like that's what
I
I'm
think
saying. Like, is it born or is it learned? Some of the stuff you're talking about.
I think it's both. Um, and this is another controversial topic. This interview is gonna get pulled up if I run for governor in 20 years. But I think it's both, and I think that it's the classic question of nature versus nurture, and I think it's a stupid question because I think it's nature and nurture. But one of the interesting things, have you been looking at have you watched anything about CRISPR technology and RNA editing?
I have not. Enlighten
Okay,
me.
so this I think is going to be like fire, like finding fire for the first time, or when it came out, that new iOS update for humanity. So basically, they've mapped the genome, to a certain degree, and they've found, and it's one of the reasons why they got the COVID vaccine so quickly, is they've been able to identify within your genes, like Parkinson's, is just one piece of a gene in your body that might not have the protein connections, that they've got this RNA tool that's kind of like a hunter, where it goes through your DNA and finds where there's a mismatch within the DNA, and it can identify the exact place of DNA within your body that's giving you Parkinson's. And then this RNA, which is CRISPR, is this technology that can snip the connection, take a connection from another piece of the body, place it back in with healthy DNA, and fix it. And it is gene editing. And this is fresh, new technology that we're now developing fully, where we can, when you talk about the nature versus nurture, what I think is going to be the next big thing, and I'm investing in it, is this CRISPR technology, because we can take a lot of the nature out of the equation. So like if you've got alcoholism, if you've got Parkinson's, if you have any sort of, muscular problem, if you have some of these codependencies that are genetic, like the idea that nature versus nurture, the problem I have with it is, of course, there's nature. We are a genetic algorithm that is the accumulation of a lot of the decisions of our ancestry.
That is what's crazy. Sorry to interrupt, but like, our like grandmother's diet like could impact our brain function right now. Like that's where the brain, we just have no fucking clue. Like how, like it's so new to us, but like our grandmother's stress level.
Yep.
Like the exposure to sunlight, the weather that they lived in. Like there's so many things we just have so little like clarity on what affects like who we are and how our brains operate.
All of her genes were affected. So she could have had, some bad genes within her genome, but some really good ones that were still her, but weren't as impaired. And you can replace and inject and change with the bad ones with the good ones and fix them. And it's not just a single fix. It is a multi-generational, just like certain generations, there was smoked, ate, terrible food, had bad, nutritional density in their diet, and how that affects you. We are now, I think, at the first point in real human history where we have identified a way to undo it.
Are these modifications made before the child is born, or is this like a living being modification?
Both. It's insane, and it's going to change everything. And there's now, the whole world is coming together. This is happening so quickly that you've now got like biohackers that are doing CRISPR kits, and there's a scientist right now that as a libertarian, I think that people should be able to sell their organs. You know, if you can sell your, if you can sell your body doing manual labor, why can't you sell a kidney? Who cares? It's your kidney. It should be regulated so we're not killing people off to get kidneys. But, someone wants to make 30 grand and sell a kidney, they don't care, let them do it. But with CRISPR, there's a scientist in California right now who is growing human kidneys inside of pigs by injecting the embryo using CRISPR of a pig fetus with cutting into the DNA of that embryo and replacing the pig DNA portion of the kidney with a human DNA version of the kidney, and they are growing human kidneys inside of pigs. So think about the longevity effect that's going to have on the world. It's mind-boggling, and it's going to be a whole new industry that is going to frickin' boom. And Catherine, what is her name? Catherine Wood. Have you heard of Catherine Wood?
No, I have not.
She's an investment portfolio manager. She's got index funds. And she's got one that is investing. She's got one that does like innovation. So it's like Tesla, it's AI companies. It's got a little bit of blockchain companies. It's done really well. She's got another one that is exclusively focused on CRISPR. And it's going to change medicine. It's going to obliterate much of big pharma. And it's coming now. And it's pretty exciting. So we'll get back to the nature versus nurture, but I don't think that it's inappropriate. A lot of people in society, this is another thing that drives me crazy, but another people in society are so politically correct that they fail to acknowledge reality, which inhibits us from fixing it. And I don't think it is politically correct to ignore real problems. I think it's politically correct to identify, be realistic, and fix them.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's pretty exciting stuff. I mean, the one thing I think, if there's two sectors that the society has a little empathy for, it's big pharma and insurance companies. So I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. I've actually never really dove into big pharma too much on any of my podcasts, but I mean, even with what's going on in the COVID vaccine, as far as I understand, and I'm not like an expert on this, I actually just recently, about a week ago, I removed the social apps from my phone, which has been like life-changing. So I didn't delete it, but it's like I gotta be on my desktop, which is a lot less.
Digital minimalism.
So it's been great. So I feel like a lot of news comes from there. But as far as I understand, COVID vaccines, because of it being like considered a quote unquote pandemic, which by the way, like another thing that's not talked about, but like, okay, 500,000 COVID deaths. I'm not like a COVID denier or anything. COVID is bad, especially
it's the flu.
COVID is bad, especially if you're at risk. But, how many of these COVID deaths were somebody in their 70s or 80s that were overweight? A vast majority were overweight. A lot of studies have showed, 80+% of people dying of COVID were severely overweight or obese. Like, how much time do they have left? You don't see that many 80-something-year-old obese people. Like, obesity is a really, really bad thing. If it's not COVID, something else would have got them. So anyway. So like the death toll, it is very, very suspect, because there's a lot of bullshit. Federal funding for reported COVID deaths. A lot of these people, that it's like, how much longer did they have left anyway? And not to be like
yeah, and if they had COPD because they smoked cigarettes for 65 years, did they die of COVID?
Well, that's the thing where it's like, it's politically like incorrect, but it's silly, because that's just data. What I'm talking about is like, and that's again why like the lockdowns are still so crazy to me, and like you can't see your grandparents. Like, how much longer do some of these motherfuckers have left anyway? Like, how many kids did not get to see their grandparents in the last year because of fear of COVID that just died for another reason? Probably a lot. So it's
And
like,
how many people, I've got a buddy that runs he's one of the world's best spine surgeons in Houston, Texas. And his practice also does breast cancer screening. And people couldn't go get breast cancer screening for a really long time because it was only surgeries that were, only certain surgeries and certain things were approved. So a lot of people, didn't catch their cancer in time. And what other impairments that were created from these rules, right?
yeah, that's something that's wildly underreported as well. Is there was a pretty sharp decline in reported like new cancer cases and stuff, and it's not because of like them not being the case. It's because if there was a fear created slash it was probably more fear related than because hospitals eventually were allowed to open up. So I feel like there's such the fear stigma of what COVID could do, which that's a whole nother thing too. Like there's tons of articles that show like how people perceive the threat of COVID to what the actual data is. There's a lot of people that believe like you have a very, very high chance of hospitalization and just all this stuff. But anyway, big pharma right now, these massive for-profit companies, because of the consideration of like a pandemic, as far as I understand, it doesn't need FDA approval, which is why like I don't know how a lot more people aren't skeptical of the vaccine. There is a big chunk, myself included. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I am skeptical of a vaccine that is just pushed through with not a lot of data compared to a virus where I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my own health and like fucking beat it like I did. But like, so there's no FDA approval, and because of like the pandemic circumstances, they get to avoid a lot of legal liability when they're a for-profit company getting like large government dollars.
Killing it.
Like what the absolute fuck? Like that's like one of the biggest scams of our lifetime. You know what I mean? You get unlimited government funding for a vaccine, like worldwide, essentially. You have very little long-term or no long-term studies, and then you're like immune from liability because of the pandemic consideration. Like, is that like that has a big play in like what's going on, and that is like 50 years from now, like do we not look back at the handling of this whole thing and like the biggest fucking scam in the last 50 to 100 years? You know what I mean?
Thing that I listened to Joe Biden's speech the other day and talked to a bunch of Democrat friends of mine that are like, look, Joe Biden came into office and he fixed COVID. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Hold on. Who pre-bought almost all the vaccines in the world? Who pre-funded as a venture capitalist Pfizer? And pre-ordered like 200 million doses before the vaccine was even done or we even knew that it would work, and put an investment into those companies to make sure that the United States had first right of refusal on the vaccines. Like, we can't just give Joe Biden the credit for the vaccination rollout when there wouldn't have even been a vaccination rollout without Operation Warp Speed pre-funding and pre-reserving all the vaccines.
Yeah, I mean that's what I have, and I can't say for sure, but I assume we align on like Trump was a very poor political like person in a sense of how he communicated and things he said and his attitude, and like very, very big narcissist. But from a policy standpoint, you can have two thoughts at once and be like, hey, there was a few things that he did that, and yeah, I agree. I mean, even like reasonable Democrats should be able to look at that. And if you just look at where we're at compared to the rest of the world, that should say, I mean, look at what's happening in India, and now our country is like basically almost completely back to normal.
Yep.
I
And
mean,
look at what's happening in Europe.
yeah.
Europe's a disaster. I've got a buddy who, when I was actually did an ice bath with him this morning, and he's Irish, and he was telling me that what is that company out of the UK? Not Moderna, not Pfizer, but AstraZeneca. So like this whole COVID thing happened and Brexit happened. And the EU is really pissed off at the UK. AstraZeneca is a UK company. And so what's interesting is he said that the EU like blocked, the usage of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and now a lot of Europe, I think is still in lockdown. Like I read 3 weeks ago that Paris was entering a mandatory 3-week lockdown, full lockdown. And so it's fascinating to look at the rest of the world, and I think we handled it pretty damn well.
If you like the common sense thing, and Texas and Florida were aligned here, it's like the data shows, again, pro data, pro actual science, not pro like what's culturally acceptable and like what like a few people think on social media. Like, protect the old people. If guys like you and me get it, who gives a shit? Like, why? Like, seriously, like, not like, and that's what Florida and Texas did. And if you look at mortality rate, we're right in line with states that have been locked down this whole time. Like yeah. That's pro data. It's like, cool. Like, if you can, you get it, quarantine, so you're just not spreading it for the sake of spreading it, which most people are probably for with most colds. Like, anytime if I'm deathly sick, which is very rare, but if that were to happen, I'm not like going to my grandparents' house and hanging out with them. So yeah, I think there's just basic things that people are going to do. I'm not going to just walk. I get, sick. I'm not just walking around like living a normal life. But yeah, I mean, that's...
Seems pretty rational, right? Like, this kills this 1%, 3% of the population 5 times more than it kills this other percentage of the population. Let's protect this part that is super susceptible to it and put everything. I mean, shit, if you look at how much we spent on COVID and how much money we lost from a GDP perspective, we could have stuck every single senior with a comorbidity. We could have bought a massive island and built a bubble and stuck them on it and had like 10x ROI versus what we did.
I agree. The handling was, again, that's what I'm saying. 50 years from now, do we not look back at this from a government overreach standpoint, from a unnecessary spending, from paying all these unemployment benefits it's like hurting the private sector big time now. There's a lot of like lumber prices are through the roof. You know what I mean? Like a lot of like side effects from this. It is very, very poorly managed. I have another like deeper philosophical question, and this is what I think is maybe the biggest difference and what drives a lot of this. In just 50 or 100 years as society, we've really transitioned. And if you look to just how people live their lives in a lot of other ways, it's like safety and security is like priority number one, I feel like, over everything. And that's the justification of the lockdowns. It's like, if it can save one person's life, like if I have to fucking hear that again, but like if it can just save one person's life, if we can do this, it's just like we've been like ironically like addicted to the safety. I actually feel like the byproducts of all this are way more detrimental. And there's, again, tons of studies that show out like millions of people worldwide are gonna die of hunger because of these lockdowns. Like, there's so many negative benefits when you just stop the planet to save a small select few, in which we should have just protected those few. But like, why do we, like, where do you think that came from as society, where it's just like, again, safety I feel like is so important, you know what I mean, where it's just like safety over everything, and if it can save person's life, we don't give a shit what else happens.
So one of my favorite classes, actually my favorite class that I ever took in college, I went to the University of Colorado Boulder, and my favorite class I took was ethics and business ethics. My teacher was amazing, but she introduced me to, have you looked at the differences between deontological thinking and utilitarian thinking?
I have not.
So this is the root of your question. And I deal with this. I actually ask people in interviews questions to identify whether they're deontological or utilitarian. And deontological is the perspective of, I will not do anything bad that has a negative effect on anyone under any circumstance, period. So it's looking at individual outcomes and individual actions. Utilitarian is greatest good for the greatest amount of people. So one of the questions we ask is, and this is not a politically correct question to ask in an interview, but I do it anyways, is, if you were driving school, if you saw a school bus and you knew, and there was a homeless guy right there. Homeless guy had committed a bunch of crimes, had raped people, but a bad dude. And then there's a school bus filled with a bunch of kids. And God came up to you and said, you've got to solve this question. You can either kill the homeless man, and the school bus full of kids will get to school safely and the kids will grow up great, or you can do nothing. You don't have to kill the homeless man, but just know that if you don't kill the homeless man, the kids will die. What do you do? And a lot of people like probably you and I are like, kill the homeless guy. I'm going to save the kids. Other people will say, well, I'm not going to hurt another person because that homeless guy is innocent to the kids at this point. And so that's kind of the question of deontological versus utilitarian. And I think what we've found is America used to be very utilitarian, greatest good for the greatest amount of people. But we're seeing a kind of a social shaming perspective that is not understanding the full calculation of how it affects society, that's dictating mandates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never heard of it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. So does that thinking, is that nature nurture? You know what I mean? Is that from like how our parents raised us to be? Because you even hear from like think about like grandparents' age compared to like even how we grew up. Like I feel like, it's normal for kids to just ride their bikes around the neighborhood through the city, and now it's like, I don't think that, if anything, crime rates have dropped. There's a lot of data to show crime rates have drastically decreased since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. A lot of data that shows that. But now, like, kids don't do that. Kids don't ride the bike to school like they used to. Even though there's a lot of benefits and life benefits you can get from making decisions, crossing the road. And it's like, do you think it was just a generation of being raised with a certain mindset that's got to this point? Or is it nature? Or like, why is the shift in thinking?
Have you read Steven Pinker's book, what is it, Enlightenment Now?
I have not, but I'll add it to my Audible right now.
It's freaking great. And it talks, it's a book of data. And it's a book of really positive data. But not biased data, but positive data about society. So it looks at like the last 500 years per capita deaths from murder up until now. It looks at, per capita deaths in the United States and globally from hunger. It looks at per capita crime ratios. It looks at all this different stuff, and it paints a really beautiful picture that the world is getting so much better every single day. And it has been for the last 700 years. The last time, you've got little peaks, like during World War II, you've got peaks of homicides and famine, and you've got little things, but it's like this. But yet you ask a lot of people, a lot of fear-based people, how's the world doing right now? And they're like, oh, the world has gone to shit. And it actually hasn't at all. The world is getting so much better every freaking day. It's amazing. And, free market capitalism and innovation and freedom and liberty and education is creating this incredible change. But what we have had change in both a positive and a negative light is the transparency and the magnification of problems. So in 50 years ago, someone gets murdered, barely makes the news. Some kid gets his lunch money jacked and he's stabbed, barely makes the news. Now it's like reshare. You got all these moms next door on the Nextdoor app, like da 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 da. It's created this like hyper sensationalism of problems, which is great because it helps us, knock out those problems. But it also creates a false environment and a false lack of faith in humanity.
Well, I mean, the biggest one that's relevant to what you're saying is and I brought this up on my episode last week, is the police brutality statistics.
Bingo.
1,000 deaths a year from police officers. If just like, you would think the number is 1 million deaths a year if you would just watch the news. 1,000 deaths out of hundreds of millions of interactions and hundreds of millions of people in a country. Could it go down? Could we increase police training? Absolutely. Is it
how many police officers were killed?
A lot. That's, yeah. I mean, well, okay, so a lot. Like, probably a comparable number,
Probably
maybe, I don't know the exact stats, but it's, probably, I think a little bit less, because of those 1,000, I think a lot are considered armed and dangerous. It's a very, very small percentage that are, like, unarmed. Because obviously that 1,000 includes literally an armed suspect with a gun. Of course, like most people would agree that person should be shot. I mean, it's a great example. And I have to think that modern politics and financially incentivized media corporations are the main two reasons for that. I'd say the second being the most important one, because if people are happier, why would they watch the news? Like, I don't know any happy people that spend a ton of time watching the news.
Well, fear sells, and these companies make their money off of eyeballs, and so they've got to keep people riled up, and they've got to keep people freaking out, or else their viewership's going to go down.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Well, the good news is, and this is why I value, whether you love a guy like Rogan or you hate him, at the very least, he just has people with different opinions on his show and differing viewpoints, and the viewer seems to be shifting more towards stuff like that at a pretty fast rate. So the positive out of all this is it's just like, more and more people, I feel like, are just kind of like, it's, both sides. Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they're making a big deal about stuff. Less and less people are taking that serious.
And, this is a perfect example of capitalism. This is why I freaking love capitalism. Because, some people will say, Neo-leftists will be like, we have to take Fox News off the air. And right-wingers will be like, CNN should be sued or CNN should be eliminated. The beautiful thing about capitalism is that it self-corrects problems because people choose. So when our media is ridiculous, you got Sean Hannity over here who's just, saying wacky shit all the time. And then you've got CNN over here. I can't even watch CNN. It's just a bitch fest. People like Joe Rogan, entrepreneurs, people who want to solve problems and are conscious capitalists solving problems for society will create solutions and the market will correct towards them. And that's incredible. That's enlightenment now.
And that, by the way, is something we haven't touched on too much, but that's important because that's not government dictated either, which is phenomenal. And that should give us all faith in society and humanity at like the largest scale. Is it wasn't government that told us to watch less news, and it just happened because people, right or left, regardless of your political affiliation, more and more people are being like, hey, something about this just does not feel right? And that's a good thing. And it was capitalism. I think that's a great way to end it, Lucas. That's it. We can, but grateful for having you on today, man. And I'm definitely going to make that intro for you as well as soon as we get off. Okay?
Thank you for having me, brother. Another book you should check. Have you read Principles?
I have. Ray Dalio's.
Yeah, great. Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, next time you're in Austin, look me up. And thank you so much for having me. And how blessed are we to live in a world that is continually getting better and people can choose how they want to live and where they want to invest their money. It's incredible.
I agree completely. So we align there. So yeah, thanks again, man. Good catching up.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.